let's say window. So just on the screen. So I should also stop video, right? It's better. It will be better for the bandwidth. So I will first stop video, then show the screen.
Yeah, we can all stop videos. It's fine.
Now, do you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And now?
Yes.
In full screen?
Yes.
Great,
Yeah.
great, great.
But now I don't see full screen. Let me see.
How
we made the full screen and don't see the beautiful face of Julian and the beautiful face of my friends there.
I think it's on
Change layout.
change layout
Sidebar.
the bottom right.
Bottom right. Okay, I will check it out. Thank you.
Click on the screen, and on the bottom right it says change layout.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready? Let's go. So this talk, it's about a very, very specific attack that targets mining pools, which is called the block withholding attack, and a solution that I came up in the past couple of weeks, that it's a new family of consensus algorithms. But what I would like to take from this talk is not only these two technical developments, but also two other things. The first is how difficult it is to develop decentralized protocols that are incentive compatible and have the right incentives to prevent attacks. And the other things is that the techniques that I use to design this protocol, the cryptographic and cryptoeconomic techniques, are simple and are very useful for many other decentralized projects. So you can take the ideas and use them in other contexts. Even if this consensus protocol, which is experimental, has some problems, or even if that happens, then the techniques that are used are very useful. And the talk, I think it will be split in two parts, so not to take more than an hour. And so you can join the second part if you feel that you like the first, or you can invite the friends to the second part. So I will split in two, and maybe it's less than an hour, the first part. So first, the problem. So why do miners involved in mining pools? Maybe in the previous talk of Tincho about mining pools, you talked about this, but I would just repeat this. So the main reason they join pools is to reduce the variance of payouts. So suppose that I'm a small farm, I have 100 A-miner S10 Pro hardware, state-of-the-art. I invested $250,000 in equipment, and another $250,000 in operations and data centers. And then I start mining, but I get a payout on average every 2 months. So how do I make sure that I can pay the electricity bill? How do I make sure that I can pay the employees and the warehouse, the data storage rent? So this is the main driving force for miners to join mining pools. If you think about solo miners, then the thing is much worse. So it may take decades to get the average time for a payout. So you are forced to join mining pools, right? So this is the problem, that the only solution is to join mining pools. So what are mining pools? So mining pools allows a lot of people to collaboratively join their resources and then distribute the revenue of mining between all participants. So they would produce more frequent blocks than solo miners, and they have to distribute the reward somehow proportionally to the work being done by each miner. And this is a very tricky thing, because there are many attacks depending on the way you distribute your revenue, and maybe that's a good topic for a next talk. But it's something that pools need to do. They need to find a fair way of distributing revenue from all the participants that collaborated mining. And for that, they need to know how much hashing rate was contributed by each of the participants, right? So in exchange, the mining pool administrations, they charge some fee, which is about 1%. It varies depending on the pool. And that is, for example, in the case of Antpool, about 50K USD per month, which is not much. But if you consider that the net revenue for miners, it's maybe 10 or 20%. If you take electricity, operating costs, and hardware, etc., from the equation, then that fee represents maybe 5%. So there is, I mean, if miners do this, is because they have to. It's not because they want to, because it's quite expensive. So mining pools also provide some other benefits to individual miners. So first is running the Bitcoin instance or the client to the network that is being mined. Also, having a good connectivity with other participants with the mining network. This is very important to win the competitions when two blocks arrive at the same time for the same blockade. And also, mining pools are very well prepared to deter denial of service attack, which is something that at some point was very common. So this may not seem very relevant for Bitcoin because a Bitcoin node does not consume a lot of resources. But if you think about a mining pool for Ethereum, then these things are very relevant because running an Ethereum node is not so easy. It requires a lot of resources. So even if Bitcoin miners join pools because of variance in payouts, Ethereum miners may join pools not because of variance, but because of they reduce the requirements to run nodes and the cost of running nodes. And in case of GPU miners, things are much more important because they generally switch cryptocurrencies depending on which cryptocurrency is paying the highest amount. So now instead of running one client, you may have to be running 10 different clients. So it seems very important to rely on a centralized entity that is running all these clients. So these are other reasons why pools join mining pools, where miners join mining pools. So let's review how a mining pool works. You probably know about this, but for those ones who don't, it's just easy. So the setup is there is a mining pool operator which is sitting in the middle. It's connected to the Bitcoin network with a Bitcoin node. It has a database that it's used for accounting, for tracking how many how much hash rate is contributed by each of the clients. The clients are the miners and are also sometimes called workers. And so one would expect that the mining pool will send a header to the client. The header also already has a template of all the transactions that are included in the block, and the client would respond with a header that is solved. So a header that has a nonce that reaches the difficulty to become solved in the solved block for the network. But if this was the case, then there will be no way of distributing rewards because everything would be paid to the winner. Then there will be no need of mining pools. So we need a way to account for different contributions, and that is done by what it's called a share. So a share is essentially a header solved at a lower difficulty than the actual difficulty of the mining of the network, right, of the blockchain. So it's really much lower, like millions of times lower, so that clients can create these shares while they are trying to find the solution to the proof of work puzzle. They create a lot of these shares of lower difficulty. So the mining pool will tune the different difficulties, maybe for different clients, so that they send about one share every 3 seconds or so. And these shares, if they don't reach the difficulty level to become a real block in the network, then they will just be used for accounting. So in the case of merge mining, a share can reach the RSK difficulty, which is between the Bitcoin difficulty and the share difficulty. And in that case, it goes to the RSK network. And if the share reaches the Bitcoin difficulty threshold, then it can be used both for Bitcoin and for RSK. So any questions until now? This is how mining pool works. So it's, do you have any questions? This is the basic to continue. Okay, keep on. So these are the approximate number of iterations of hashes that needs to be performed to reach a hash. Share, which is approximately 2 to the 51. Then the RSK difficulty, which is approximately, this varies over time, 2 to the 66 operations. And the current Bitcoin threshold, which is approximately 2 to the 72 operations. So we can see that the share, it's much lower difficulty than the final blockchain difficulty. So what are the problems with the mining pools? The problem is that they are subject to a number of different and even more complex and evolving attacks. So these are the main 3 attacks that they receive. One is called pool hopping, which is basically an attack on how the pool distributes rewards, and that allows some miners to hop between different mining pools and get an unfair reward. So this is something that we will talk in another moment. The other attack, this called lying wait attack, which is a temporal withholding of a block. So you produce shares, but if you find the lucky block that it will be a Bitcoin block, then you could temporarily withhold it, and sometimes against a specific payout systems, this gives you an advantage. So we are not going to go into this attack, maybe for another talk. So we are going to go to talk about the sabotage attack. So the sabotage attack is a permanent block withholding attack. So what essentially happens is this. I took this drawing from a presentation of another person, but I liked the dishonest miner's Angry Bird. So the sabotage attacks goes like this. So the miner creates these partial solutions, these shares, and as long as these shares do not reach the Bitcoin difficulty level, they are submitted to the mining pool as always. But if the malicious miners finds that one of these shares that he produces is a valid Bitcoin block, then it throws this share away. It doesn't give this share back to the mining pool operator. And at first time, you may think that this is completely abnormal in the sense that it will cause monetary damage to anyone, but it's not. It will cause a revenue loss for the mining pool, but there is a second degree effect, which is that by doing so, this miner will decrease the relative hashing rate of this mining pool, because if this mining pool is producing less blocks in the network, then the total hash rate will be lower, and then all the other miners will get a higher percentage of hash rate, so they get higher rewards. So what some academics found is that if you mine with some of your hash rate in a very big mining pool, and then with some low amount of hash rate, you sabotage other mining pools by not submitting the winning ticket and just submitting shares, you can earn more money because you will be paid by the shares, because most of the mining pools payout systems will pay by the number of shares you send, but at the same time you will earn more from the other pools. And of course, this obviously can be an attack directly performed by a big mining pool to a smaller mining pool just to bankrupt this smaller mining pool. So it can be for profit, or it can be just to bankrupt another mining pool. And in 2014, there was one of these attacks that was executed against a mining pool called Eligius, and the estimated losses were about 300 bitcoins. So this was a real attack on a real network and a real mining pool. So what are the solutions to this attack? So the first solution you can think of is just perform some statistical analysis of the miner. So if a miner is sending a lot of shares, but it never sends any solved block, a winning ticket, then you can flag this miner as misbehaving. Well, the problem with this is you will never detect the miner in advance, and you will detect it too late, because this miner may produce a valid block once every year. So you will be being cheated for a year until you might find that there is a low statistical variance that points out that this particular miner might be cheating, which is too late and too slow. So we cannot do that. The other solution, which was created by Rosenfeld in 2011, this is very old, it's called PopQuits. Everyone is there, because I have to check from time to time that my internet connections has not go down. Yes, you are there. Great.
Yep.
So the other thing is it's called the PopKits, which is basically that once in a while you take some pre-solved block and you send it as a probe to a random miner. So you know that this miner will solve the block because you have already the block solved. So you scan the blockchain, you take a random block from the blockchain, and then you submit that to the miner. Okay? And if you do this randomly, then you will find out cheaters, because they will not submit you the solution that lies in the range they should be scanning for that block. Well, the problem with this, there are many problems with this. The problem with this is that it's very, very difficult to come up with a block that looks similar, with a header that looks very similar to all the remaining headers. So it's very easy for the malicious miner to detect it's being probed. Okay, because you cannot use a whole block because it will have an old timestamp. So the only thing you can do is use a block that has been just created by your own pool, and then immediately submit the same header and the same nonce range for the other miners to find. Okay, but again, it's very easy for the miner to protect from this protection. It happens to me that in 2013 I was hired by at that time was one of the biggest ASIC manufacturers in the US to code this into the Eloy pool software. So I did. I did code one of these solutions, but this manufacturer went bankrupt a few months later. So I don't think it really went into production, but I did code it. The other solution, which is a lot more interesting, is called oblivious shares. So the idea here, it's very easy. So let's say that the miners cannot differentiate, cannot detect if a share is a valid Bitcoin block or is just a share. So if they don't have any way of knowing this, they cannot throw away one specific share. So the idea is that you include in your Coinbase, in your transaction, a hash of a random number. And this random number is chosen by the mining operator. So now you change the consensus so that a block is solved if it reaches certain amount of proof of work that is changes dynamically with the difficulty adjustment algorithm of your blockchain, but also you must, there is another rule that says that the pre-image of this hash must match, the last 4 bytes must match the last 4 bytes of the block hash. So now the miner, because he does not know the pre-image of this hash which is embedded in the transaction, he has no way of knowing if there is a match of these 4 bytes against this value that is hidden by the mining pool operator. So I think this is one of the best solutions. It was proposed simultaneously by other people, but it requires a hard fork or a soft fork. It can be implemented as a soft fork, and this is very interesting. But it's very, very difficult to soft fork Bitcoin. It might be more not so hard for a ongoing blockchain like Ethereum, but for Bitcoin, it's hard to soft fork anything. Now, the other solution, it's given an extra reward for the discoverer of the winning block, right? So if there is an extra reward for me, if I submit the winning ticket, then I will be losing a lot of money if I don't, okay? I think this is the most simple solution, but I don't know why it's not used by mining pools. I suspect that because you have to pay some significant amount of this revenue, like 5% or something, or 2%, then that reduces the expected revenue for everyone in the short term and in the midterm. So people are discouraged from using pools that pay an extra reward to the person who submits the winning block. So, but this is something that I should talk more with the miners why pools do not use this mechanism. So another thing you can do is increase the block rate. So if you increase your block rate, you naturally reduce the variance because there are more blocks, so you get more frequent low value payouts. So there are some physical limitations, limits on how much you can increase the block rate. I think the limit would be about 5 seconds. Then you have a lot of complications about blocks that cross the network simultaneously, that compete. And then you have to choose one of these new consensus algorithms like Ghost or Prism that allows you to build a tree of all the blocks that are competing and somehow weight the different branches. But there are some physical limits. And even if you could reduce the block latency, you don't solve the problem because you need a million times less latency for solo miners you need a lot less variance that an increased block rate can provide you. For instance, there is the case of P2 pool, which is a decentralized mining pool that we will analyze later if you have time, which is interesting. So finally, you have this new consensus algorithm that I created in this last couple of weeks, still experimental. I find it very interesting, which is I call Nakamore consensus. I call it Nakamore because it's very similar to Nakamoto consensus in many ways. It's not changing much. It just kind of changed the civil resistance part of the consensus. And this is a way to make the system incentive compatible. So we remove any incentive to perform this attack. So let's continue. Well, we said that we needed pools, that it's impossible to avoid pools, but now why they should be central? Can we create decentralized mining pools? So there are many problems with centralized mining pools. So first of all is that you have to delegate the choice of the best change, of the best chain. So that means that you are actually giving the pool or a colluding group of pools the power to perform 51% attacks and double spend attacks. And once, if you want to, to stop that, you will realize too late. I mean, you will realize your pool has performed a double spend attack when it's all over, and then you will want to switch the pool, but it's too late. So you are basically giving the pool all your your own right to choose which is the best chain. There has been some advancements. For instance, in Stratum V2, there is a part of the protocol called job negotiation, which allow miners to negotiate the block template, but this is all very new. Second, you allow the mining pool to perform transaction censorship. So in case of blockchains such as Ethereum or RSK, where you really want to have to prevent transaction censorship because many protocols rely on fraud proofs like rollups, then you don't want pools to have this capability. And of course, they are central single points of failures, like they can be hacked, they can be controlled by governments, they can receive denial of service attacks, and they are a single point of control in the sense that they can try to impose, some kind of KYC or blacklisting of coins, and then that reduces the fungibility of your coins. So basically, if we could eliminate a centralized mining pool, then that would be great for Bitcoin, but great for all the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So it's essentially against cryptocurrency and Bitcoin ethos. So what are the origins? What are the ideas that contributed to Nakamore consensus? So every time you create something, you probably are taking a lot from previous ideas and previous papers. So in my case, the first one is P2 pool. P2 pool is a decentralized mining pool that works by creating a separate blockchain, which is composed by these shares, the same shares that are submitted. Instead of being submitted to a central pool, they are submitted to a new blockchain, which has a completely separate network. And this chain starts chaining the different shares. And every new share you chain in the Coinbase, it has to pay all the past shares. It has to correctly pay, to all contributors, summing up all the shares that contributed, right? So you end up having a Coinbase transaction in Bitcoin that has maybe hundreds of outputs because it has to pay from the reward of the block to all the contributors up to that point. So when a share is found that is the lucky ticket, the one that solved the Bitcoin difficulty, then it already has in the Coinbase all the required payments to different miners. So this started in 2011. It has some success for, I would say, 1, 2, 3 years. I don't remember, but now it's completely dead. Like the amount of hashing power that it has is 0.003% of the total hash rate. Like it's very, very low. And why? Because it has these problems that I told you about. It is subject to 51% attacks because, as any blockchain, if a miner with a higher hash rate joins, suddenly, then it can start reverting blocks. For instance, if the whole hash rate of this pool would be 5%, then a miner having 10% could completely reorganize the chain and disrupt it. It also succumbs to the block withholding attack that I mentioned block withholding attack before, right? Yes. So it succumbs to the block withholding attack because it's very easy not to submit this share to the blockchain. It has a problem of state blocks because now you have a blockchain that works at a higher rate. The P2 pool has an average rate of a block every 20 seconds. So now you can have a lot of stale shares, and so you lose revenue from stale shares. And then you also have the problem of hopping. Why? Because, well, I didn't explain much about the problem of hopping, but the problem of hopping is tied to a proportion. If you proportionally pay the shares of the block reward, and P2 pool has no other way than paying proportionally to the people by taking into account the block reward. So this is one of interesting project that failed, but still tried to do the centralized pool. The other interesting project, let me check the time. Okay, the other interesting project is Smart Pool IO, and this was a paper and a prototype implementation in 2017 that basically coded the whole logic of a pool into a smart contract, into an Ethereum smart contract. So this is something I like. This is something I really would love to bring to RSK. And this was probably the motive, so I started working on this. The problem is still subject to this attack. So the block withholding attack will still affect this kind of pool because you cannot control what the miners submit to the blockchain or not. So essentially, you have the same problem. It's also a failed project because it was trying to create a mining pool for Bitcoin, but working in Ethereum. You have a lot of problems with the mentality of the Bitcoiners and the Ethereum people. So it was very hard, to allow this to happen. Miners, Ethereum, Bitcoin miners will be using Ethereum for a decentralized mining pool, which is not a problem as we have in RSK. So RSK is a great platform to create a decentralized mining pool for Bitcoin. Another interesting development is the Flight client, which is a system for proving cumulative proof of work. And we will see that this is required. And also is Snarks, which is also a way to prove computation in a very, very succinct way. And recursive Snark is also an interesting topic. And finally, there were some very interesting discussions of flow schemes in 2014 and 2015 in Bitcoin discussions. And I just mentioned this because you may want to go to these links and click and see what are the the things that I had in my mind. So what's the idea? So the idea is that Nakamoto consensus relies on a single proof of work condition that is essentially progress-free. Okay, there's no memory. At any time you are mining, it's not important in the past. I mean, if you didn't find any block or any share in the past, it will not affect what happens in the future. So every share you do gets equal probability to be the winning ticket and to solve the proof of work puzzle. So Nakamore consensus relies on two proof of work conditions. One is still progress-free, which is the submission difficulty, which is similar to Nakamoto consensus. So you get a chance to submit a block if you find a solution to a very hard puzzle. But the other is a cumulative proof of work condition. So now you accumulate work for a number of time, and you are only allowed to submit a block if you have performed this accumulation phase. Okay, so there is an accumulative difficulty, which is a number of, in this case, on shares you have to collect to let me drink water, to be able to submit a block. And maybe I didn't mention, but the final objective is to be able to create a decentralized mining pool. Okay, that's the goal. Having a consensus algorithm that allows naturally a decentralized mining pool. So in the first family of this, I consider this a family of consensus protocols, because you can vary many parameters and get slightly different protocols. So the first one is, just to give an example, it's called Nakabase, and it splits the mining phases in two phases. So in the first phase, it's called the accumulation phase. So you will accumulate shares, and you don't need to submit these shares to anyone. You just accumulate shares and you get enough of them. Okay, let's forget a moment about the mining pools. Let's think about the individual miners. And then you have a submission waiting phase where you really try to find a winning ticket to be able to send your proof. And essentially only request that the accumulation difficulty phase is a little bit longer, has a little higher difficulty than the submission waiting phase. So here we see the different levels of difficulty I'm talking about. So we will have the cumulative and submission difficulty, which are very high. Like, say, this is an example for Bitcoin. And then G times lower, which will probably be 1,000,000 times lower, you have the consensus share difficulty. Okay, so these are the shares that the miner should collect to send to the blockchain to have his block accepted. So there is no intermediate in this stage of the explanation. There is no mining pool. It's just the miner that has to collect a lot of shares and send those shares directly to the blockchain. Okay, and below that consensus share, we have the mining pool share, which must be lower. And when we talk more about mining pools, we say why it has to be lower. Okay, so during the first phase, the accumulation phase, it's clear that, and I want to convince you that no withholding attack is possible, right? Because it doesn't matter if you find a block that has the difficulty of the Bitcoin blockchain. It just matters that you collect shares at its lower difficulty, right? So during that phase, there's nothing you can do about what we call an attack. But during the next phase, the submission phase, then the problem comes again, right? So again, you could submit shares but not submit the solution. So we have only reduced the problem to 50% of the time. So it's not a good solution at this point. But at the end of the submission waiting phase, when you find block, you have to submit two things to the blockchain. Once you have to submit the block, which proves the submission difficulty, and you have to submit some kind of proof that we will see that it's really a tree, but you have to submit some kind of proof that you have accumulated all these shares. Well, because of that problem, that it's still in this Nakabase idea, there is still a phase where you could do block withholding. Then we change the protocol into a protocol that allows pipelining. So now you can do submission wait and accumulation for the following phase at the same time. So you collect shares, but if you find a share that has a higher than certain difficulty, then you can submit the share or use this share to produce a block, right? And a block that will be sent to the blockchain, right? So you can accumulate shares for the next epoch, and at the same time you can submit a block for the previous epoch. So I accumulate all the shares for epoch 1, and once I do that, I can start the submission waiting phase for epoch 1, but I use the same shares that I create for the accumulation phase for epoch 2. And you can see how these pipelines in time. So now if you center ourselves in the center stage, in the middle stage, where I do submission and accumulation at the same time, you see that if a miner does not send a share to a mining pool, he will not contribute to the submission waiting phase, but every share he creates, he's contributing to the accumulation phase. So the damage is only to the submission waiting phase. But because the submission waiting phase is in average a little shorter because it requires less difficulty, there is always some additional times to perform submission waiting. So you have always extra space to do submission. So if one of the miners do not submit the shares with higher difficulty, then you can always fill that gap with the work of the remaining miners. And that's why I require that the accumulation phase have a little more difficulty than the submission waiting phase. Okay? So this is not, I mean, this graph I draw is not what really happens. What really happens is something like this, right? So you don't know how much time it will take the submission waiting phase. I mean, it can be very fast if you have luck, or it can take a lot of time. What is important is that every time you are doing the submission waiting phase, you can also be accumulating, okay? So you actually are saving shares for later use, okay? So I think that, yeah, I think it's a good time to stop here and maybe do the second part in a few days. What do you think, Julian?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay,
if you...
so yeah. So what I would like you to think, if you want to keep learning more about this and what the techniques I use to prove that I have accumulated a number of shares, is this. First, how do I prove I accumulate a number of shares? Okay, what techniques can I use for that? Okay, and then you can think about what are benefits this system can bring and what problems it can bring. So this is something that we will talk in the next part. I hope I don't leave you with all the the questions and none of the answers. but that can serve as a bait for you to come to the next talk. So I really would like you to fill a survey of how this talk was, if this was useful for you or not. So Julian will give you a link so you can do that.
Yeah, I sent to the chat.
Yes. So while you fill this survey, if you would like to do any question, then I'm open.
Can I ask to have access to the presentation and make comments or questions?
Yes, of course.
Because I think I have question about some formulas or equation. I don't know what that means, but I think I can just ask and make a comment in the presentation. It will be easier.
Yes, there is a 20-page draft paper for this, but I changed some of the nomenclature that I use in the presentation, so I will have to go to the paper to change that to make them in sync. But I can also send you, any of you, this draft paper for you to read more. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so I'm sending now in a few minutes the presentation to all of you. Julian, do you think it's good to stop, right? It's better.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Yes, great.
There is 10 minutes left.
Maybe I can use these few minutes. I can depart from what I had planned, but just give you a glimpse of what is the pool hopping attack, that it's very easy to understand. So the idea of pool hopping is that, let's say you pay proportionally to all the miners that have submitted shares, and when you find the block, you distribute the reward proportionally. Okay, so at the beginning there are very few shares. Okay, so if you are lucky and you find a block, you may get a lot of reward because you are distributing this with a few people. But as the time progresses and the pool does not find the block, then there are more and more shares, more and more people, and then it's less attractive to you to keep mining on that pool. So an attack to the pool is, at a certain point in time, you just go away and you enter. You still are going to be paid for the shares that you already submitted, but you can just jump to another pool that is starting and get a better payout. So this makes miners jump from one pool to another and trying to get better revenue, and it obviously against all the others, right? So okay.
Sergio,
Yes.
sorry, just a small question. I know you put it as bait, but for the next talk, but it's something that is pushing my mind. That you mentioned that in this Nakagood consensus, it's not possible to have to hide a solution. And I know you proposed there like a Merkle tree with the shares with the accumulative, the accumulation phase, in order to have proof that you have all those shares.
Mm-hmm.
But what prevents you to have a separate Merkle tree, one with the solution and one without, and then you submit the one without that with the whole tree there?
Okay, so what we will see in the next part is how to prove in a succinct way that this tree have actually leaves where every leaf is a valid Bitcoin header solved at a certain threshold. So you won't be able to cheat and submit a tree that does not have the cumulative proof of work. Okay, so essentially there are two techniques, one based on snarks, recursive snarks, and the other based on kind of like client proof, but it's more simple than that. It's a challenge response protocol that can turn a non-interactive with a fiat Shamir transformation, so that you will be able to prove that this actually has cumulative proof of work. So to your question, you cannot change one tree for the other, because that is committed in the block, and you just cannot remove that part.
That is committed to the block, but it's not in the block yet until you submit it.
Yeah.
So
So the moment you submit it, the moment you have to bring this block. If you try to do otherwise, like trying to create the shares after, then it will take you a lot of time, and you will probably lose the opportunity to submit the block, because then some other miner will submit the block. So it generally it's better to first find the shares and then try to submit the block, and not trying to find a block and then trying to find the shares.
okay, maybe it will be more clear in the next talk.
Yes. Essentially, you will have to prove this. This is not something that the blockchain will accept. The blockchain must have a new rule that will look into this tree, but will receive this proof, and in a way that is very fast to verify, right?
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So you had to change the way that there is right now the consensus for the blockchain.
Yes,
Okay.
That's the thing. You have to change.
Yeah.
What is very
now I
interesting?
understand what.
Yes. Maybe I didn't mention. This is not a new kind of mining pool. This is a change in the consensus, and it turns out it has a lot more benefits. When I talk about the benefits, this is not only the only benefit. There are more benefits with change the consensus, but this is a change on the consensus. And the other interesting thing is this can be made as a soft fork. So everything I talked about in Bitcoin, I mean, if you apply this to Bitcoin, then you can do that as a soft fork by restricting the rules of the blockchain. Okay. So let me see. Stop sharing.
Interesting. So this could be implemented by well, it needs the miners also. But
I lost you. You could you repeat?
I was saying that this can be implemented. I was thinking this can be implemented by the full nodes in a way, but then if miners mine blocks that don't follow the consensus, then the block. So
as any soft fork, it should be implemented first by the miners. So the miners are the ones that need to implement this. So for me, I mean, this project, which lasted a week or so, it's more about understanding where are the pain points and what can we do to improve this. So I'm not sure that the actual consensus algorithm will be ever implemented in Bitcoin. But I think that there is a lot of learning about decentralized mining pools that you can learn from these developments.
okay.
Maybe RSK could use this consensus algorithm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think we can implement them for ourselves. No.
Yes, totally. Okay.
What would be the downside of implementing something like this in RSK? Like basically that is unproven or untested, I imagine, no?
Well, it's unproven and untested, so that's the downside. But yes, I have not coded this, but not even simulated this. I did some simulations that I will show you later, but this is so I found no flaw on the protocol, and I consulted some Princeton professors about this. So I'm getting some feedback, but I don't find any fatal flaw in the protocol. So maybe in the future, this is something we can add to our blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
It solves a number of additional problems of fairness, and it reduces enormously the bandwidth requirements for mining pools also. Because if you don't have to send shares to the mining pool, you only have to send, a proof, then it completely removes the problem of network bandwidth for the mining pools. So there's a huge benefit for mining pools to use this. But this is something, of course, that I let the community to criticize, to analyze, to improve. Okay.
Nice.
So and last question, in the last thought, you mentioned that if you only submit the proof for the proof of work of Bitcoin, then where's the share for RSK?
If you also
only submit the proof for Bitcoin,
yes,
where is the proof for RSK?
Well, the RSK difficulty is below Bitcoin's, but over the consensus share difficulty. So it's in the middle. So if you will submit a share, and you will be protecting from someone trying to hide the blocks that are solved at RSK level 2. Okay, so if someone tries to hide Bitcoin blocks, he would hide some of the RSK blocks, but not all. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for assisting, and thanks, Julian, for organizing. And I hope to see you very soon in the next part.
Thank you, Sergio, and please fill the form.
Thank you.
Yes, fill the form, everyone. I will be sending the presentation. How do I send the presentation to everyone? Should I?
No, only to the people who fill the form, Sergio.
Okay.
Only send the presentation to the people who fill the form.
That's the way to do the right incentives.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, it was a joke. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Uy, nos dejó el Catán.
Espera que está grabando.
No sé.